Welcome. Thank you for coming on this beautiful afternoon when going for a drive is probably a better idea. My name is Bill Cutress, in case any of you don't know me. For the past 2 years, I have been chairing a committee that was formed to review and recommend revisions to the MCC Constitution. And when I told a friend of mine that was what I was doing, he said, boy, I'll bet there wasn't much of a lineup for that job. And he's right, there wasn't. But it is a job that I feel is necessary, and I believe it is strongly is necessary to do well. The committee and the elders have been working diligently for the last year or so, revising and reformatting. We made a lot of revisions to the old Constitution. Many of them were just to clarify points that were in the old Constitution, but some of them that we think will improve the Constitution so that the new one is a step up, better than the old one. There were many changes that were merely wording or grammar and punctuation or reformatting. And if there are any questions or concerns about such things, they will be referred to the Ministry of Wordsmithing, Grammar, and Punctuation for debate and final resolution. And notice of the meetings of that committee will be published well in advance. The elders and the pastor who looked at this were, of course, Pastor John, Beth Schmidt, Glenn Chambers, and myself. The committee was Hugh McPherson, Susan McPherson, Jack MacArthur, Wendy MacArthur, Glenn Baxter, and I was the chair. So I got to work both sides of the street. And but it was easy enough to blame any disagreements on the other guys. So we managed, we worked through it. And there's a question that I often ask myself, particularly in the last year or so, is why do we need to do this? Why do we need a constitution anyway? And the simple answer is any group needs a constitution if it's a group of people working together for a common objective. This could be anything from a company to a club to a church. And when it's very small, it's easy. It's easy to meet together and talk and figure out what to do next and how you're going to do things that you need to do. But and if the group stays small, you probably don't need anything like a document that is your constitution. But if it's large enough, like if it becomes a business, if your little enterprise becomes a business, then it needs to have a name, needs to have a description of what it does, and it needs to have a bank account. Those are things that it would need to get a license to conduct business. If it's even big enough to be incorporated, then it needs a statement of incorporation, which is kind of like a constitution. It has to describe what it is that the business does, of course, and it describes a little bit more. It has to describe things like signing authorities and boards and shareholders and all of those neat things. If you are a nonprofit organization, particularly if you are a charitable organization, you need to be registered as such. You need to be registered as a charitable organization. And for that, you need to have a constitution. So we as a church, nonprofit charitable organization, need to have a constitution. We also, and the basic, there we are. The basic things that go into a constitution are a statement of objectives and a statement or a description of your organization. And what I mean by that is things like who can be members, who can join this group, Who will be the leaders? And how will you choose leaders? And what kind of organization will you have? And here we're talking about things like reporting authorities and signing authorities and who needs to be involved in what kind of decisions. In Canada, a nonprofit, particularly a church, must have a constitution and may not apply for charitable status unless it files a constitution. That's another reason for us to have one. And a church also has to include a couple of additional things that businesses don't need to. We need a statement of faith. This tells people who might like to join this church what the fundamental beliefs of this church are. And while they're very important to us, and they don't differ a lot from most other Protestant churches, but it's vital, I believe, that we inform everyone where we stand on important issues, fundamental issues, so that no one is misled when they first come here. And it's also important for new members to understand and agree with this statement of faith before becoming members and committing to the membership in this church. So those are things that are in our constitution that might not be in a constitution for every business. And we also have an organization that addresses spiritual growth. It's the spiritual growth of our members. We're concerned about that. So we have a pastor who is trained in spiritual matters. We have ministers whose responsibility is specifically spiritual growth, and spiritual growth in discipleship and in teaching. And we are not the same as every other church in that we do not belong to a denomination. We're non-denominational and we are independent. And so the question then is, how should we organize ourselves? We're free to organize ourselves any way we want. We have that freedom. We're free to write a constitution any way we want, because nobody else is giving us a constitution saying this is the constitution, this is what you must follow. I'd like to just briefly, ever so briefly, talk about some of the organizational models that are commonly used in churches, and you might recognize some of them. The first one is called the Episcopalian Model. And a church, a congregation, is under the headship of a rector or minister, or it may have various names. That minister reports to a higher authority, in this case, a bishop, and the bishop in turn reports to an even higher authority, an archbishop. And you might recognize this as from your past. I do. I was raised in the Anglican church, and this is exactly what we had. It was a rector, and then a bishop, and then an archbishop, and the bishop of, a bunch of titles, anyway, a bunch of levels. And there's nothing really wrong with it. It has worked. It has been used in the Catholic Church for thousands of years, been used in Protestant churches throughout. And this is the local church. And the local church is a small part of a much larger organization. And all matters of policy and strategy, hiring and firing, discipline, they're all handled by a higher authority and given to the church. They are not under the control of the local church. And that's, again, that includes the Constitution. The Constitution comes from on high, and the Constitution is the Constitution that we live with. This is also known as the strong pastor model, because one individual at the very top of this organization is above all the others. And again, nothing wrong with it. intrinsically, except that it depends on one person. It is that there's so much power vested in that one person that it's dangerous. And we have the saying of, or the terminology of, power corrupts. And so much that affects so many in this model is vested in just one person. And a person high up in such a hierarchy might begin to think that they have a divine right to be there, and they are speaking for God at all times. So the word that comes from them throughout this organization is considered to have come from God. And we believe that's kind of dangerous. But that's us. The local church has no choice in leadership, doctrine, or management. And the local church does not own its own land or buildings, because the corporation that owns those things is the top level corporation. It's a big organization that includes a lot of churches and a lot of assets and a lot of people. How did I do that? Sorry, Let me check my next slide. There we are. This is the slide I wanted. I'll just go backwards. This is the Presbyterian model. And the Presbyterian model is similar in structure to the Episcopalian model, except that the leadership of the congregation and then the leadership of levels above the congregation are vested in groups of people and groups of elders, which is a bit better than being in one person. And then that group of elders nominates or appoints people to sit on the next level, which is a presbytery, and the presbytery appoints people to sit in the General Assembly. So there is the same kind of hierarchical structure, but instead of being vested in one person, the authority is vested in groups of people. And those groups of people make their decisions and then pass those decisions down to the lower levels, and the congregation abides by those decisions. That becomes your constitution, becomes your doctrine, and becomes your people and your methodology, your hiring and firing and your leadership, and all of those things are given to you by the higher authority. Again, not a bad thing on its own, and probably an improvement over the single or the strong pastor model. You may notice, and I'm sure you have, many churches, many churches that operate under these models. Often, those churches started out as one church and then split because of differences in opinion about doctrine or leadership, or some leaders who were, believe it or not, human, had failings, and they did not perform as they were expected to perform. So people started a new church. And so there are so many denominations with a large number of churches spread over large areas. And there are literally millions of people that belong to those churches, and few of them are always happy. Few of them are always content. And there's always a feeling of disenfranchisement because they didn't get to pick their leaders. They didn't get to pick their constitution. They didn't get to set the rules. So there's been a movement to a congregational model. And this is not new, by the way. This congregational model has been around for a long time. Anyone who has a tradition in the Mennonite church knows what the congregational model is. And what it says is that God speaks to the congregation, and the congregation decides. And the congregation decides on everything from who will be the pastor, who will be elders, what will be our doctrine, to the color of the carpet. Every decision goes to the congregation. And there we are. And in this model, every member of the congregation has a voice. And presumably each one is hearing from God as to the best choices in every decision placed before them. And there are elders who are part of the congregation. And then from those elders, a pastor is selected, and the pastor often leans on other elders to become his board. They are what we might have called deacons. They are assistants to the pastor. They do not have the same authority as the pastor, but they are set aside to assist the pastor in his work. And the local church could be seen to incorporate the whole bunch. And the local congregation has final authority in all matters, which is a good thing, technically. And problems with this organization arise from there's very little mutual accountability among the congregation. They are not accountable. An individual in the congregation is not accountable to other individuals in the congregation. They vote and the majority rules. And if they're all hearing from God, hopefully they're all hearing the same thing, and the decisions will be good. But you never know. You don't really know that your doctrine and everything is sound, because you're not really accountable to anyone. The church is not really accountable to anyone outside the church, not a higher authority. And that no accountability to the higher authority can be an issue. And I'm showing you these things not to say this one's good, this one's not very good. There's no model that is perfect. And churches tend to rise and fall, frankly, based on the quality of their leaders. And I am going to there we are. What a church needs to succeed is godly servant leadership. And these models that I showed you are not doctrinal models. They're not based on doctrinal principles. They don't differ because of doctrine. They differ because of individuals. And the individuals have differences of opinion. Individuals have different intimacy with God. They are at different levels of walking with God. So there's a lot of differences among people. And those who are in leadership positions, our belief is that those who are in leadership positions must submit to the authority of Christ and obediently follow his lead as revealed in scriptures. That is our belief. And we try very hard to do that. Here at MCC, we have an organization. We built an organization that's kind of a merging of a merging of the Presbyterian model and the Congregational model. We are Presbyterian because we use a plurality of elders. We use a group to, in fact, make major decisions in the church. But it is Presbyterian but we are congregational in that we are independent of any wider authority or higher authority other than the authority of Jesus Christ. So we as leaders must be certain, make every effort to ensure that we check in with Christ before we do anything. The old Constitution here, I refer to as the old Constitution. The current Constitution here is not a bad document. What the changes that we are proposing are not huge. There are some that we believe are significant, but they're not huge. And we believe that they will improve on the old document. This, I'm assuming that you are all fairly familiar with the old Constitution. We have a locally developed Constitution. We have a pastoral search committee when we need a pastor. We have a local board of elders, and the board of elders is appointed by the current board of elders and affirmed by the congregation whenever new appointments are made. And the elders, ministry leaders, and deacons from who formed the leadership team are all appointed and affirmed. And the congregation votes on major issues like the Constitution and like budget and financial matters. We have the annual general meeting for that purpose. Now, let's get to what we are proposing, the revisions we are proposing. And I hope we won't. We won't go through this in great detail because many of the changes are superficial and grammatical, optical changes rather than substantive. But there are some substantive ones. One is that we are going to separate the Board of Elders from the leadership team. In our current Constitution, the Board of Elders is part of the leadership team. The Board of Elders sit in leadership team meetings, and the ministry leaders and others who are deacons, we're referred to as deacons, then join in, and we have a large leadership team, which includes the Board of Elders. And the Board of Elders also met separately. At the very least, that is an overlap of responsibilities. If the elders are in their own meeting and then they're in a meeting with deacons or with other leaders, then are they elders or are they leadership team? And can they separate, and should they separate themselves in that way? We believe they should, and we believe that this will grant more autonomy, more flexibility to the leadership team, enable them to do more of what they believe is appropriate for their ministries, while the elders will set direction. They set direction and vision and spiritual direction, but the leadership team will then work within those guidelines that were set by the elders. And that's the way we had wanted it to work all along. But the way the old Constitution was written, it was confusing. The other thing that we hope to avoid by doing this separation is the existence of multiple hat leaders. We have more than one example of people who have one job, who have an elder job, who have a deaconish job, and who have a ministry leading position, and nobody knows exactly which hat they might be wearing at any particular time, and you go to them with a problem that is pertinent to one of their hats, and they may be wearing another hat at the same time. So it just clarity. We're hoping to clarify the roles and responsibilities in leadership, in the leadership group. So separate the Board of Elders from the leadership team. We are also proposing a distinct spiritual leadership organization, and it will be under the guidance of the pastor. We anticipate that in in future, if we have more people, which we believe we will, we quite possibly will need more than one pastor. We will need, and we also probably need ministers who are not pastors, but have this spiritual leadership requirement and spiritual leadership responsibilities. They should be guided by the pastor or that pastoral team. So we have invented a position, which is a pastor, described that role. Then we've described a minister, bracket S, to describe that role. And we expect, if there are such things as associate pastors or youth pastors or music pastors or something happening in the future, we will have that option in the Constitution to add in those definitions if they're needed. So, distinct spiritual leadership. And another thing that comes with that is not written in the Constitution, it's implied, but it's not written, is that every ministry leader, every team leader, every committee leader will be expected to provide what is called one another ministry. We want the team leaders, we want leaders in this organization to take that responsibility, be a leader and be a discipler, be someone who welcomes new people to increase the growth and participation in the congregation, and who ministers to the people on the team. And it's not enough to organize and coordinate. Part of leadership is communicating with your flock, with your team. And the other way that works is when anyone in the congregation has a question, has an issue, has a problem. Maybe it's only a small problem, but they should be able to go to any ministry leader, any committee leader, any team leader, any elder, any leadership, any minister, the pastor, and talk to them. We need to open more channels of communication rather than fewer. So we want communication to happen. We want you to be able to talk to leadership. We want leadership to be able to talk to you. And this one-on-one communication is probably the best way to do it. Another thing that's happening, of course, is virtual meetings and virtual viewers. We have people who tune in to this church service every week, and they are interested in learning more often, and they need to be able to contact the church and talk to someone who is prepared to discuss with them, engage with them on doctrinal matters, on theological matters. Maybe if you feel you can handle it. If you don't feel you can handle it, then pass it on to the pastor. He'll take care of it. Or Beth, Beth too. So, but increasing the amount of communication that is possible is a good idea. And overall, we want to increase the level of involvement of people in the congregation with the church. And the church is all of us. The church grows and thrives when we are all working on the same page, all working together, all working towards the same goals. Another thing we have we're recommending a limited tenure of elders. In the old Constitution, the term of an elder is 3 years. Another line of the old Constitution says any position, all positions may apply for re-election, which means we end up having the same people, elders, who don't want to leave. They're doing a fine job, but they would rather not step down just now. Things are going well. But from the non-leadership, 90% of the church, it looks like those people are the leaders. They always have been, they always will be. And that's not true. However, what we're doing here is we're going to say, yes, the term of an elder is 3 years, but after you have served 2 terms, 6 years, you must step down for at least a year. And when you want to come back, if you want to come back, you will apply for re-election or reinstatement as an elder, which leads to the next point. We are proposing that elders be elected, rather than appointed and affirmed. And there is nothing wrong with them being appointed and affirmed, but the congregation has absolutely no input into who is appointed. They do have input they have a vote on affirmation, but when the only choice is one person, yes or no, then it's really hard to say. They have to be really bad before you would say no. And hopefully none of us are ever in that position. However, if you have a choice of 3 people, only one of whom will be elected, then the one who receives the most support from the congregation will be elected. Bit more democratic than it has been in the past, and you do have some control over the congregation has some control over who the elders are. We are planning to stagger the terms of elders so that every year, once this gets rolling and coordinated, every year there will be a requirement for 2 more elders. And the elders will change because after 2 terms, someone's going to step down. 2 of them are going to step down. Yeah, 2 of them are going to step down and will need to be replaced. Along with this is going to be the need for a nominating committee. And we are going to be forming a nominating committee, which will include members of the congregation. It will not be just elders and deacons, excuse the term. It will be members of the congregation who will be on this nominating committee. They will be around tapping you on the shoulder, recruiting new elders, and asking you if you will stand for election. But then it will be election, not will you agree to be appointed, but will you stand for election? And that, we believe that's going to be a positive change and get more people involved in leadership, more people involved in selecting leaders, and more people involved in the church, in the objectives of the church. We're a group of people working together towards a common objective, and we know what the objective is. We think we do, and we will move heaven and earth. God will move you in order to get us working together towards his commission. The other thing that we are going to do is make the membership agreement, or the membership, becoming a member of MCC, a little bit more, I guess you could call it formal, but we want members to, in fact, know what they're getting into and make the commitment. say, yes, I want to be a member here. Yes, I will vote as a member. And I understand that I have a responsibility as a member. That has not always been the case. People who have been here for a certain length of time say, yeah, I like it here. I guess I'm a member, or I'll be a member. And so they do. And then they come back and they merely occupy a seat on Sunday morning and don't do anything more. And that's unfortunate, but what we're asking is that when people become members, they commit to membership. They understand that membership has privileges and also has responsibilities. And so we're going to make that a little more formal, ask you to sign a document. And then the other part of that is when people leave a church, they very often just don't come back. They drift away. And unless you happen to know them personally, you don't know if they've gone for good, if they're away for a season, if they got mad and left, or if they found something better. You just don't know. What we are going to do is contact everybody who was a member last year, asking if they still want to be a member. Are you still a member? People move away and we don't know about it for 3 years. We only know about it because some mail comes for them and they never pick it up. So that's the membership change that's being made. One is sign here, say you're a member, and then someone will contact you annually. It might just be by email, it might be by phone, but you will be contacted and asked if you want to continue to remain a member. If you remain a member, you will have voting privileges and you will carry the same responsibilities that you did before. And we understand that there are snowbirds, there are people who go away and go away for 6 months or something in the winter, but they still belong. They still are part of us. They still consider us to be their church and their home church. We have one lady who many of you probably know who has, because of COVID, has spent 2 years now in Costa Rica, but she has been in Bible study virtually. She's been at meetings virtually. She's been at the AGM. She was at the AGM virtually, and she takes part in the activities of the church. We haven't seen her for a long time, but she's still a full member of the church, and we love her dearly. And she, of course, remains an active member of the church. She doesn't get counted in our population figures, in our statistics when we take attendance, but she would be one of those ones that is a bona fide member of the church and wants to remain that. So we made some changes in membership, and those were they. Oh, well, okay. Today is the first of 2 information sessions. It is available on Zoom. We are Zooming even as we speak, and that is being recorded. And that recording will be available to anyone to view later on if they couldn't make it today. We expect if we get questions and answer questions, the questions and the answers will be available on Zoom. And if there are changes that still need to be made, if there are some things in the Constitution that we believe need to change, then we have time to make changes. The other, okay, so March 20th today and April 3rd are the two information sessions. The vote on the Constitution will be on April 24th. Because of people being away and people being on vacation, there are a lot of people on vacation. Wish I could afford to, but they're on vacation because to escape the weather. And they are members. They have the right to vote. With the information sessions, with the recordings of the information sessions, they should have enough information so that they can vote intelligently. Therefore, we are going to permit absentee voting for the congregation. The absentee voting is, I think, valid. We have done it before. We did it because of COVID. And we have done it before. And we did it with our pastor affirmation because it was in the middle of summer. So circumstances can drive us to do something a little bit unusual. So we will make absentee voting available. And the reason that absentee voting is legitimate is that we will provide all of the information that we have and any amendments to the Constitution 30 days ahead of time. Now, do your math. 30 days before April 24th is March 27th, March 24th, something around there. If we're going to make any changes, they have to be made by then. Because as of that date, the Constitution will be frozen, and that will be the Constitution that will be voted on. In the case of the affirmations, I announced at the AGM that there were several vacancies in our leadership, and those vacancies, some of them will be filled, some of them will remain vacant, but those that we have, where the elders have selected new people to fill a position, a vacant position, they will be presented for affirmation. Same deal, 30 days notice, so that in case anyone has any knowledge of these people that might disqualify them, they can say that. They have the time to say that. And that's kind of a distasteful to some people, but it's also important that those who are selecting these people, the elders, don't know everything about everybody. We like to think we do, but we don't. And someone may know something that we should be aware of. I heard a horrible story of a church where a man was nominated or presented for eldership, and his wife was sitting in the congregation knowing full well that he was abusive, had been for many years. She said, "This isn't right." But she didn't want to stand up in church and say, "I accuse." Instead, she remained quiet, and he was made an elder. We don't want that to happen. We know that there are things that we don't know, and we want to provide this channel for you for the congregation to be able to bring to our attention things that we should know, and before we make that appointment. In the future, once we have adopted this Constitution, there will be a nominating committee and a vote, a slate of nominees. So that will be the opportunity for people to provide feedback that might disqualify or it's basically put in question the qualifications of the individual. So, to summarize, we hope that there will be less confusion about the roles of leaders. We hope that there will be fewer leaders holding multiple hats. We hope there will be more opportunities for participation from more people in the congregation. We hope there will be more opportunities for input or feedback from the congregation to the leadership teams. We expect that we will be operating with a wider sphere of influence. That gets to the question of virtual meetings and virtual Bible studies and online participation in our church that heretofore has not been considered to be valid or not been considered to be active participation in the church, but it can be. So we're expecting that to happen. We hope that the Constitution anticipates that and allows for it. And then the bottom line is we believe that God is going to do great things in this church if only we listen to him and follow his leading. And this, I believe, is part of it. I believe that giving us time through the COVID crisis to sit back, reflect, review our Constitution, and come up with a fresh document is part of God's plan. We had more time to do it now. And it was a little bit more difficult to get together, but we managed. And I'm excited. We have to prepare for what's coming. None of us knows what's coming, but we have faith that we're in God's hands and God knows what's coming, and he's preparing us for it. With that, I will open the floor to questions. And Glenn will come around with a microphone. If anyone has any questions from the floor. What, Sharon's not saying anything? Sharon Bieber, not you. Come on.
Comment, Bill, so 30 days from the vote, April 24th is Friday, this Friday, March 25th.
Yeah, okay, 30-ish days. Yeah, we have about a week in which to present everything. And change, I spoke about changes to the committee, and they all said, sure, we're willing to change if someone comes up with a good suggestion or notices something we missed, or something like that. And what we have to do is evaluate the change that's needed or the change that's being proposed, and ask ourselves whether it's important that we change it now, or if we should talk about it, discuss it, and amend it at the next AGM. You know, those kinds of questions need to be raised. The other question on the other side has been, why do we bother asking questions? Isn't this just another instance of leadership saying this is how it's going to be and expecting us to just accept it? And I'm part of leadership, and I promise, no, that is not what we want this to be. In fact, that's why we had a committee none of whom were part of the leadership team, except for me, and I was just the chair. I just kept the lid on. I did not, I don't think, did I drive conversation? Did I drive the changes?
You worked very well.
Yeah, we did. And so it is not something that has come down from on high with no input from the congregation. It is something where we want to make sure that we have a fresh set of eyes, at least one, on this document to make sure we haven't done anything wrong. And if there are improvements to be made, we'll make them. And we'll make them soon, so that we can legitimately hold a vote on April 24th.
So if we have questions or comments, is there an email or something that we could send?
There is. Good point. I missed that. There is an email. The address has been distributed with notices, with the weekly notices. And it is Millerville Church, Sharon?
millervillechurch@gmail.com.
millervillechurch@gmail.com. That is a confidential email address, which will go only to Sharon Hernandez. And Sharon will then share any emails that come there with the committee and the elders. And the committee and elders are the only ones who will see the email. It will, of course, if it comes by email, it will identify you. We will not identify you. We believe that people are going to be more free to share their thoughts if they can do it anonymously. Anonymous, not really. Confidentially, I guess, is a better way to put it. It's a confidential email. We will know who it is, but we will not tell anybody. Okay, questions? Rob, wait for the mic and.
Maybe I'll just open it up and see if other people ask questions. First thing is thank you to the guys who worked hard on this. I mean, I wasn't aware until actually the AGM that we actually had this in process until some of the announcements were made, and I know it's a daunting task. So thank you for putting in the time to do this. It's intimidating. It's an intimidating process. Anyway, just one thing I just wanted to ask clarification on. It's actually not a point. I just don't understand it. And it was in the corporation. It said the corporation is represented publicly by its officers who are appointed annually by the Board of Elders according to the Constitution. Who are those officers? Are they like employees of the church?
No.
Are they? Yeah.
No, they're not. They are chosen from the Board of Elders. And the Board of Elders has been appointed and affirmed, and the officers must be a chair, vice chair, treasurer, and secretary, corporate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just didn't know who that was.
Right. And the treasurer and secretary do not need to be elders in the way we've described it. And of course, and then there are two, the chair and the vice chair do need to be elders. And that was why we also said in the Constitution that the pastor is not an elder.
I have a bunch of other questions, but maybe someone else can go next.
Are there other questions? Anyone else got questions? Go ahead, Rob. You have the mic.
The other one was, maybe I'll just jump to governance. And I won't jump into the statement of faith stuff yet. Governance just added in red. The Board of Elders provides directive vision and goals of the congregation with a directive philosophy. I was just wondering, is that directive philosophy is defined by them giving vision and goals to the congregation? Like the goals and vision come from the Board of Elders to the congregation?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's.
Yeah, I know that's a model. And I know there's probably lots of different opinion on that. I'm just wondering if, when I look at scripture, I know we use servanthood or servant leadership. I see Jesus telling, don't lead like the Gentiles do. And so I don't see that kind of top-down style of leadership as maybe my flavor of a biblical model. I see probably more the Board of Elders being stewards of or facilitating goals and vision and that kind of coming from the body. And my thoughts are, if we want participation of the body in the church, typically vision or goals that come from within the body's much more adept or much more interested in engaging in that type of vision versus, vision coming from elders, even though it might be good vision. It's get on board with the vision. This is what the vision is. So I don't know whether that's worth a change or not, but it is a directive philosophy is not bad. But I just wonder whether if we flip it around and have that vision and goals from the congregation and the Board of Elders and the pastors being facilitators of that, or maybe refining that, stewarding that, I think it's totally opposite. So, and I'm not asking you don't have to make a comment now. You don't have to answer that, and I don't want to put you on the spot and stuff like that. But maybe that's something to consider. If it's not something to consider, then it's not. But I see this as more of a business model, yeah.
Okay, can we, he was going to talk to that.
I'll just wait for that.
Thank you.
I hear what you're saying, Rob, but if I read that carefully, the Board of Elders provides direction, vision, and goals of the congregation, not to the congregation.
Correct.
We are maybe meeting halfway. You know what so, and part of our whole thing of the committee was to bring in more congregation involvement. So we are in total agreement with you, but I just see the way it's written there, it can go either way.
No, I think "of" is a very important word.
Yeah, often the little ones are.
Bill, just while you're on that same clause there, it says, see item 3.3, Board of Elders. Like that didn't make sense to me because I couldn't really find what that's talking about.
Item 3.2C2.
I know it says here.
Yes,
Government.
I know, it's wrong. It should be
Okay.
3.2C and then 2.
That'll have to go to the grammar committee.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll refer that. Sharon.
In all fairness to Bill, when we went through these, there was so many paragraph changes and things. So if there's only 2, we did pretty awesome. And if I get, so I got the mic, since I get to pick it up, I get to say stuff whenever I want. So
By all means.
to both these points, I think as the committee, when we were looking at that, when we split the elders board and the leadership team, was it the elders board would bring that sort of corporate direction to the leadership team. So for the leadership team to enact, I guess would be the way to sort of capture that. So it was trying to capture 2 things at once. And I have to agree with you that the context was that the elders would sort of bring the direction forward of how we're trying to go. And it's the scheduling of things like Easter and Christmas and things like that as well.
That's good.
Okay, so we survived that one. Okay, go on.
I can just speak to it, right? Like,
No, you need a mic.
For the people on Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay. The other one was it's not an extreme, but like we've made revisions to the statement of faith. So as we're making revisions to the statement of faith, this can be an endless process in the sense of we could write a lot more. And so some things, that I'm going to say, should they be added, or do we think they're not necessary to be added? So 2.2 talked about scripture, and we had a pretty simple statement on scripture about the the word of God being infallible and divinely inspired. Maybe I'm wrong again, but when I read the Bible is infallible and inerrant in its original manuscripts and is the final supreme authority, like that idea of original manuscripts being added, it makes or suggests in my thinking that the one I have in my hand is maybe not infallible, or maybe not, and so I would probably suggest going back to the old one. My worry is which translation isn't and which is not. And I think it's much easier from the pulpit if we have a concern with translations, because I mean, there is differences that we address it from the front, or address it as leaders. And my fear is going back, I mean, none of us, I mean, I'm not a Hebrew scholar or a scholar of ancient texts. We don't have one. And, we can refer to books, but it feels like maybe unintentionally stepping back before the Reformation, in which the idea was to put the Bible in the hand of an average person, so that not they could challenge authority, but they could rely on this. They didn't have to be that kind of person. And I fear adding to this statement could take us back that way. And yeah, I just, it doesn't feel good to me.
I understand what you're saying.
And which version? I mean, ESV, ASV, like, I mean, yeah.
Pastor John, you want to field that one? And I'm doing this deliberately.
I'm not going to debate it. So,
No,
I mean,
well, and I'm not picking on you.
that's fine.
The statement of faith is pretty broad
Yes.
by design. The individual doctrinal statements or beliefs about what Scripture means in one certain situation is ongoing. There is an ongoing debate and differences of opinion. What we should be including in the statement of faith is this is the big picture.
Yes.
And if we include details, we're going to start stumbling over details.
Well, I'll give you my stumble.
Sure.
The LXX is the Greek Septuagint, it's a translation of the Hebrew scriptures. Some of our Bible uses that. It's not an original, well, they might consider it original text, but it was translated from the original text. And so we get into this space where we're splitting hairs, I feel like, and it's going to create actually more issues than we want.
John?
He's not wrong. Luther and Erasmus debated this at the Reformation, and Erasmus came down one side and Luther on the other side. They both had the points. So I don't know that we settle it here. I think what we have an eye to is context. So during the Reformation, there was like one translation, the Latin Vulgate, and that was it. And we wanted to get it out in the hands of the average person. Today, you have multiple versions on your phone. You have access to Dead Sea Scrolls. You've got access to everything that was not available in the past. And I think what we're concerned about going forward is the proliferation of inaccuracy. So during the Reformation, there wasn't much. Now there's too much. And that's the problem, is which way do you go? I think the problem isn't accessibility, the problem is discernment.
Yes.
And that's
The miracle is that the languages the Bible was written in are some of the few languages that are still intact.
yeah. So it's a
miracle.
dead.
I mean,
It's a miracle.
Israel speaks Hebrew. So there's no excuse to say, I don't understand what the Bible says.
Oh.
In a sense,
Oh.
in the original, you can learn the Hebrew if you really want.
You know, just, I
I'll
mean,
say
it's
I'm there yet.
Okay.
just a point of like,
And-
you can think about this.
I believe that this isn't the only point
Yep.
that is like this. And I guess the question is what should be in our statement of faith and what should be reserved for debate or where it's open for question. And I myself was not very involved in writing this statement of faith. But I would suggest that the authors of a statement of faith would be open to discussions on the statement of faith and what is in there and what should be or what should not be, and perhaps the wording could change. But that's something for the future. I don't think it should be a stumbling block. At the same time, I have heard that there are some things in there that could be a stumbling block, and people are reluctant to sign the membership agreement which says, I have read and agree with the statement of faith, because they don't completely, or they have some questions. They don't want to sign anything if they haven't read it thoroughly and believe it thoroughly. So, they're both sides, and I have often said, I mean, I am no theologian, I confess, but I believe that that doctrine should be debatable rather than divisive. I think it's most important that we are unified, and we are unified on the fundamentals. We are unified on the big beliefs. And yes, we can differ and debate and discuss small changes or small differences, but please, let's not let it form another church. Let's not split over it. Sure.
I mean, they're all statements, so I mean, you feel free not to answer them, and it's okay. One thing was, while we're on doctrine, is we talked about salvation, and that's kind of a new one. I think it's important. I think it's great. I just wonder whether it would be worthy of adding something to that in the sense of us being a new creation or being born again. I mean, the old man gone, the new man here, like new nature. We're not the same people anymore. And I think someone's gone to a lot of effort to write this on salvation. And I think probably a worthy addition might be we're a new creation and we have a new nature. It's just putting it out there. The other, do you want to respond to that, or you don't?
John gave you a nod.
The other one was under church. And I mean, again, since we're renewing this, I mean, this could be endless. And I just put some things down that I just maybe felt were more pertinent. You see them in other doctrinal statements. One was kind of when we're talking about church, believing in the priesthood of all believers. I mean, that is the congregational participation of the church. I mean, it's the bedrock of a lot of our, what we would say, Protestant churches. And the other thing is, and I know we've just been through a pandemic, and there was good reasons to adjust how we did church, but we're in this new space where we haven't really, people are all over the map with what they consider church now. And I do think online is valid, and it's something that only some people can engage in. It keeps people connected when they're overseas. But I just wonder whether we worthy of adding something, not neglecting to meet together. I mean, that's out of Hebrews. I mean, don't neglect to meet together. I mean, the church is under persecution. I think, is that a worthy addition under church? I think that's all for my doctrinal ones. And maybe I'll just shoot my other ones real quick. Ones were, thanks for clarifying the difference between elders and ministers and pastor. I had a question about that. I think you did a good job of that. I mean, one thing was I think it's under governance. It talks about eldership, or it talks about it's Board of Elders, Spiritual Leaders. It's in 3.2C. It writes something like this: should be preferably comprised of at least 6 elected member individuals in addition to the pastor. All must meet the qualifications of elders since conversion to Jesus as Lord and Savior. Maybe I wrestled with this idea of since conversion. In my mind, this says that they have had these attributes since they've been converted. And I would say, you know, when I came to the Lord, I didn't have these attributes. And maybe I still don't now, but I think people mature, and I would much rather cut that phrase out, since conversion, and just focus on the fact that they are mature believers. People stumble, and, you know, midlife, I could stumble tomorrow and still be worthy of eldership in 5-6 years' time, or whatever else. And I'm just scared that this disqualifies people too quickly and doesn't, maybe raises the bar too high. And we end up with, maybe this is my thinking, we end up with someone who says, well, I haven't lived a good enough life, therefore I don't qualify. And we end up with people who have walked the straight and narrow, let's say, and have just terrible thought life and terrible inner life, and, you know, they end up in a position because they haven't outwardly stumbled. And so I just don't know whether this is hitting what we want. I think we want mature believers, not people who have held these qualifications since conversion. Anyway, that's just my thought. And I know that's my thought. So,
Okay. As long as I don't have to answer it. No, I'm joking. I think I know what you're saying, and I think I know what the intention was. But perhaps the words didn't convey the intention, or you don't agree with the intention. I'm not sure.
I could be wrong too. I mean, I'm just, and my last 2 things were.
Oh, 2 more. Okay.
2 more. I mean, I spent some time reading this. One thing was, I think it's great to have term limits, and I really appreciate you changing the model of voting in the sense that we vote for elders instead of, you know, how you've changed it. I think it's a great addition. I didn't get that fully when I read it, but you've explained it really well. One thing I thought was, is it possible to add to, and I don't know where to add this, but is it possible to add to the leadership roles of the church? I don't know whether that's ministers, pastor, or elders, but I know you mentioned one-on-one, what was the?
One another ministry.
One another ministry. You mentioned that in the terms of their sphere or teams. I just don't know how that translates to the congregation, and I think a weakness for us, I mean, I've been here long enough to say that, as I think one of the weaknesses has been pastoral care, and I don't think it's the responsibility of one person at all, and I don't think one person can ever fill that, but I do think that there's a pastoral care need within our church, and I'm wondering how that's facilitated. So whether that's put into this document, whether it's the responsibility of the elders to help facilitate that, or whether it's responsible of leaders to help facilitate that, whoever, it needs to happen. I think it's a weakness. The other thing was, with the term limits, I just wonder whether it's helpful to add term limits to pastor, not in the same essence as elders, but more in the essence of review and reaffirmation, not in the essence of new nominations and things like that. I think that I've seen this in a number of churches, and I always wondered why that wasn't here. It just was odd to me that wasn't here, and I just feel like it gives the congregation and the minister an opportunity to reevaluate where they are with their call, and not come to a crisis point where you actually have to either remove someone or they stumble and are removed. So I just wonder whether that's a worthy addition for both parties.
Yeah, we thought of that. We thought of that and discussed it, and the consensus was that because the pastor is a paid position, there is an employment contract with the pastor that says that the pastor may resign at any time, and he may be removed if, in the opinion of the Board of Elders, he should be removed. He is also maybe questioned. In fact, I should check. It says, right, leadership review, all positions. Any leadership position, pastor, minister, elder, or ministry leader may be asked to resign when a 75% vote at a congregational business meeting called for the purpose of reviewing their ministry approves the motion to terminate. The meeting may be called for this purpose by the board, by the leadership team, or by a petition signed by 25% of the membership. So there is a mechanism for reviewing a ministry. The pastor may resign or ask to resign by the elders, and an elder's role also, I think, is very similar. And then the leadership team member. And but that leadership review clause is there to allow 25% of the congregation to call for a review of the ministry, that of any ministry. And if there is dissatisfaction, if there's enough dissatisfaction that 25% of the members want to review it, then it'll be reviewed. Sorry.
I'm thinking more in a positive sense. As
Oh,
just a negative
and
sense.
in a positive sense,
I mean, both. I mean,
free,
because, I mean,
right,
It would
right.
be amazing as a pastor, to have a review. After being in ministry for a bunch of years, I've seen this in other churches, and the church overwhelmingly says, "We love you." And they actually get up and talk about how they actually appreciate them. It's not just a vote of affirmation, it's much beyond that. And I would much, so I don't see this just being used in a negative sense. I would hate, the only time that we review something is in a negative sense. So when there's a problem, that 25%, if I was the pastor of this church, that 25% of the people would go around and sign a paper and saying, "Hey, we need to review Rob," and before I know it, I'm out the door. That would be very hard to take. And so anyway, it's just a thought.
Yeah.
I just don't know.
Okay, we will, we'll think on that.
Yes.
Another thing that is in the employment contract is a review of performance, but not the same. I get that. So we turned Rob's mic off. Is there more business? Hugh.
You didn't comment on Rob's first thing about, and it's on 3.2C, and the third one about since conversion to Jesus Christ. And I think as a group, we were reading that, Rob, and I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense maybe to change it. We were thinking that anything pre-conversion did not come forward with a person to eliminate them from that. So I think that's what most on that. Am I right, Bill?
Yes.
So like, it's good you pointed out, we maybe need to clarify that wording.
No, I think that's a good point. I didn't think that. I mean, thank you.
I'd just like to say, Bill, that perhaps God meant that we could have that pastoral appreciation in there for a positive reason, but I feel in my heart chances of that being used positively would be rare, but we could have something like a pastoral appreciation day. Maybe we could do that, pastoral and elder care appreciation twice a year. And I think that would be a more positive way to display that and make sure that comes about.
Not a bad idea. There is a ministry of social events. And I think that would fall right into their bailiwick.
Sorry, Glenn.
Yes, Hugh.
I have a couple, I'll just wait. A couple things on membership. One, I see a discrepancy in age. The old one says 16 years of voting privileges. That the new one's gone to 18, and yet it's not written in red.
Ah,
And I don't think we discussed that at all in our committee. So I wonder if it's a typo or.
where is it? Oh, here we are. Is at least 18 years. Oh,
And the old constitution, it was 16.
that should have been in red.
Okay. And I'm not trying to open up anything here, but I know also on membership, we had the old constitution, baptism was a part of membership. The new constitution, there is not. Baptism isn't a part of membership. You don't have to be baptized to be membership.
That's not quite true.
Okay, well, tell me how it is then.
The question was whether baptism by sprinkling or baptism as an infant is the same or is enough to say you're baptized. And what the feeling was is that baptism is a symbol of an inner choice, inner decision to follow Christ. And if that decision was made and the baptism was a public declaration in a different form than immersion baptism, then that would be good enough.
Right, Phil, but I think if you read the new constitution, there is not anything about that says a member has to be baptized in any form. So that's why I'm saying, and when I see that our church has the two ordinances, one being baptism and the Lord's Supper, I wonder if it should be really. And I remember the discussion we had about the sprinkling or the types of baptism.
Yep.
And, you know, I was immersed. I'm not saying that's the only way. Someone might have got every bit out of what I got out of being immersed by a sprinkling. So and I don't have an opinion. I'm just pointing it out. Something that I saw.
Pastor John, you don't look like you're in good shape, but could you address that question?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The question was, we changed the wording of membership eligibility from have been baptized to have publicly declared, have accepted Christ as Lord and Savior and have publicly declared this to be true.
Yes.
Can you explain why we did that?
We have people from a variety of Christian traditions who might consider their child baptism valid as opposed to an adult baptism, and so on. Theologically, it's holding to the idea that you're not saved by baptism. Baptism is a public declaration of an inward work. So if you declare that you're a Christian, you publicly declare that, you're in effect doing what baptism does. So if you perceive, it's moving away from the idea of saying that baptism is a legal binding document by which you can get a passport. It's more legalistic rather than a public declaration of faith.
Okay.
So the thief on the cross didn't get time to get baptized, but he still declared his faith. So that's what we're referring to. It's better just to be able to declare your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Now you can do that through baptism. You can do it through a public testimony. You can do it a variety of ways.
That do it? Do it for you, Hugh? I remembered that once you started talking, I remembered where the discussion had gone, but yeah, and yeah, that was it. And we hope that's satisfactory. Rob?
I mean, I think it's satisfactory. I mean,
Good.
maybe it'd be worth adding brackets and just saying this is what we mean. We mean a public declaration of faith, and we mean baptism. I mean, like, well, brackets, what we mean by that, I don't know. But, well, we don't-
Yeah, and the problem is that earlier in ordinances, under a statement of faith, we describe baptism as immersion.
I mean, I just hope we don't get into the situation where someone says, I come along and I say, well, I have declared that, you know, I love Jesus and I'm following him. He died for my sin on the cross. But Bill comes to me and said, hey, you know, we're talking. He says, hey, Rob, have you been baptized? I say, no. And he says, well, I say, I'm not going to. I've been in that space where I've spoken to people like this, and they've said, I'm not getting baptized. It's enough for me just to say this. And I'm like, well, the scriptures teach something different. And so it's an awkward space, but I don't know.
We want people to come. Jane?
I was raised in the Christian Reformed Church, and I was baptized as an infant. And when we were around 18, we all took these catechism classes and all these meetings and things. And we all, if we chose, had to do what was called profession of faith, where we stood in front of our church congregation and professed our faith. So I struggle with this. I'm not a member at this point. I want to be, but my question is, do I have to be baptized in order to be? Because then it makes me feel like what I did then didn't matter in order for me to be a member here. But I do understand, believe, and be baptized. So it's a struggle for me, but I don't like this feeling of what you did then just doesn't matter.
No, well, and what it says is you have accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior and have publicly declared this to be true. That's what the new Constitution says. It does not say you must have been baptized. And you are exactly the kind of person that this was intended for, because you made a public declaration that you have accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And for all intents and purposes, you are baptized. You were baptized at that time. And I did a similar thing, except it was in the Anglican Church, and I took confirmation classes, and I got good marks on all the tests, and I was then able to take communion. And God knows that was not a baptism. I did not publicly profess my faith. I did not, I went through the motions and I memorized things, but I did not have a conversion at that time. And my conversion didn't come until much later in life. But and at that time I did get baptized, because that was the only avenue, really. So anyway, yeah, like I say, that was intended for people just such as you. We would welcome you as a member. George, sorry, no.
Just going back to the terms for elder. My concern is based on a little bit of history where we came from, where the church congregation was smaller than here at Millerville, and there were only so many leaders to pick from. And had we done that there, we would have ran out of elders, and their term would have been up. So my concern is that an issue? This Millerville Community Church painting them in a corner by, if we implement this procedure for terms of elders? I know there's vacancies, and I know they've been there for a while. So fast forward 6 years and there's still vacancies. The elder that has done his time is now told to retire, and there's no one to replace him.
Right. We are Well, I don't know what the right answer to that is. We are anticipating growth. We are expecting that that more people will feel more comfortable in stepping into leadership. We are expecting that through prayer and study and mentorship and leadership, that that people will be growing in their faith, and we don't expect there to be any shortage. The one thing that that we are implementing, I think I described it, is a nominating committee, and the nominating committee's only responsibility will be to seek out and find candidates, qualified candidates. And if they are, for some reason, not qualified, I can't think of why that might be, but they need to be mature believers. They need to have been believers. They need to have been here for a while so that we know them. But we don't see very much. We see fewer obstacles than perhaps we used to have, and opening the opportunity. We see the termination after 2 terms, or leaving after 2 terms. For one thing, it's only for a year. Maybe it may be more than a year, but it is for at least a year, and you could consider it a sabbatical. It's and they are certainly able to return. Are we going to be able to find enough candidates each year when we need them? Don't know. We know that we have not been able to here before now, and I don't know if it was that we were setting too high a bar, or if we've scared people off. I know I was a little intimidated when I first was nominated, because I looked at the people who were elders and I thought, gee, I can't talk like that one. I can't teach like that one. I'm not a treasurer. I don't know what he does. And so, there were pretty high-powered people who were there. And I thought, I'm nothing. I'm not qualified. And turned out maybe I'm not. But I think I've grown a lot in the time I've been there, and they had the grace to allow me to give it a try and to see where it grows. So we're hoping that people will feel comfortable in applying or being nominated. We don't want anyone to fail. I posed this question to the elders and to the committee. If I leave at the end of my 2 terms, if I leave at the end of my 2 terms and I'm out for a year, and then I think, well, kind of enjoyed that. I thought I did a pretty good job. And I stood for election and then didn't get elected, I'd be hurt. I'd be devastated. And what Pastor John did is he slid over to me and he said, Bill, maybe God is calling you to something different. And that eased my mind terrifically. If I'm not serving as an elder, I'll serve as something else. If I'm not serving as a ministry leader, I'll serve. It doesn't matter. We do need people of quality who are God-fearing and God-following to serve in leadership. And I believe we have many of them. And I hope we can find them. You. Oh.
I see a redundancy under the heading of treasurer. I think it's 3.2F. And it says in two different places, the treasurer will have signing authority. And I think it probably only needs to be stated once. F, treasurer, 4 and 7 say basically almost the same thing.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
I was just going to take a step back to the previous question. We're kind of written it up for a minimum of 6 elders, and minimum of 6 because God willing, we're looking for growth. But as you can see, it can go down. So if that actually became 3, that becomes easier to get a replacement than it would be with the full 6. But my prayer is that we may need 8 or 10 elders.
Any more? I'm not hearing any. I did receive one bit of feedback, and it was along the lines of Rob's question about the statement of faith, and in the statement of faith that there are some specific details in our statement of faith that are more questions of doctrine than they are of the larger fundamental belief. And I agree that there are instances of that, and I believe that that we should work to address that and make our statement of faith not generic, not loosey-goosey, but correct. And we're not going to say, if you don't believe this about eschatology, then you don't belong here. That I don't want that. And I subscribe to what Pastor John described to me as confessional theology. Anything that happened before the creation of man and anything that will happen after the return of Christ, I don't know. I believe, but I don't know. I'm not God, and neither are you. And I don't know anything to be true. I know what I believe, and the Bible says this, and I had to put a lot of interpretation in it to come to the point where I believe it. But I believe it, and I believe I have a certain view of the end times, and it may not be shared, and so be it. But I don't want that disagreement or that difference of opinion to prevent me from being part of this church. Glenn.
I don't have a question so much as I have a comment. Having worked with many volunteer organizations and leadership in them, writing a constitution is a daunting task. It's even more daunting to rewrite a constitution because you're dealing with both the past and where you want it to be or where you want it to go. So I would just like to thank the committee for the work that they've done, the time, the hours that they've put into bringing forward a constitution. Yeah, it may not be perfect, but their hearts are in the right place to make it better. And I just want to thank them personally for all the work that they have done, the hours that they put in, their convictions and commitments to making it a better place for us at the Millville Church. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, and just to acknowledge Glenn Baxter was on the committee. Hugh McPherson, Jack and Wendy MacArthur, and Susan McPherson, who is not here with us. But I am profoundly grateful for the work that they did and the grace with which they did it, because there were some not heated arguments. There were some intense discussions on many things that we wanted to change and many things that we didn't want to change, and it was not just wording and grammar and punctuation. There were material differences, but we worked through them because we all had the spirit of building something better and building something that's going to work for us. And it is, I have been reminded time and time again that this Constitution is your Constitution. And we are building it as a congregation. We're going to approve it as a congregation. We're going to live it as a congregation. And we tried our level best to be guided by the Spirit of God as we did it. And we believe we have come up with something that represents that. So we thank you for your thanks, and hope that we can answer any questions that anyone might have that might be stopping them from accepting this document on the 24th. There being nothing further, I thank you all for coming. Thank you who are online for your attendance. This session, as I said before, is being recorded, was recorded, and will be available for anyone who was not able to attend today, or even for you if you want to look again and see what did he say anyway. What was it that he said? And we're again doing our best to make sure that you had every opportunity to read this, study it, and ask us if you have any questions or concerns. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.